Welcome to the D Word by Peace Vigil. D stands for difference, a word that is often the cause of fear, divisions, and violence. In the D Word series, we talk to people about their experiences with difference, how it impacted their lives, and what they think of it. By hearing their stories, we can all examine for ourselves whether there are things that we could infer from their experiences. If you like this video, please do remember to share it. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do so now. Thank you.
Greetings of peace. Today we'll be talking to Riffat Rasul Merchant, who, in addition to raising her two kids with her husband, spends many hours every day to help people with special needs. After receiving her bachelor's degree in speech and language pathology in 2000, Riffat joined the Washington, D.C. public school system as an elementary and early childhood educator, working with children with special needs. She later completed her master's degree in special education and teaching English to speakers of other languages. Riffat works with non-profit organizations such as Islamic Circle of North America Relief and most recently with Mohsin, Muslims Understanding and Helping Special Needs. She is specifically interested in parent advocacy, championing the rights of those with mental health challenges, and eliminating cultural stigmas associated with physical and mental disabilities. Today, we learn from Riffat about her journey and in doing so, expand our understanding of difference. Riffat, a very warm welcome to you.
And to you, it's so nice to see you.
20 years ago, or thereabouts, I would say, there was hardly any talk of children with special needs. But in recent years, I hear a lot about that. At least, I feel that things have changed in terms of the discussions we are having. Please tell us about your experience in watching this process unfold. And if you really think that things have changed, are they going towards something better?
It's interesting how you said it's 20 years ago, we didn't hear much about, children with disabilities. And the fact is, basically, those children, children with disabilities have been around forever, kind of thing. It's just that they've always been very hidden in either like an institution or just very hidden, or another school kind of thing. So the reason we're hearing more about it, of children with disabilities, is because we're learning more about it, we're diagnosing things earlier, and we're just talking about it more, which is a good thing. So my experience with disability started very young, actually. In the 1980s, my parents were sponsoring, a lot of family relatives and stuff. And my cousin, Sifat Hannan, she actually lives with cerebral palsy. And so when she came, she was about 8-9 years old. And I remember in Dhaka that my dada had constructed like a walker type of equipment sort of thing, to help her walk, right? It was these two wooden sticks put together, and she would hold on to it and learn how to walk. And then she came over here, and so she began she began going to school, getting used to the U.S. Special education system. But we lived with each other, and so she was the very first individual that I had a great relationship with. We would play, she would get mad at me, and I couldn't always understand what she was saying, but I really tried. And that's how I got into my love for speech pathology, because I remember when, what did she say? And then I also tried to teach her words, and the one phrase I know I taught her was, "I love you," And
that is beautiful. And I'm also curious to find out from you whether not knowing English. I don't know if she knew a lot of English, but not knowing English, it adds like this layer of complication because you're in a new country.
The language issues actually weren't such a big deal because her teachers actually gave her other ways of communicating, such as the picture symbols and also what we call assistive technology, where she could just look at the pictures and then type and tap it and say this is what she wants. At the same time, they also just talked to her in English, and her family would also talk to her in Bengali, and she would respond back. So it's interesting because I don't think that was actually the most complex part of her education. Her brother, Saiful, he was the one who had to go to ESOL classes, but he only went for like 1 year, which is actually rather remarkable because usually students have to be in ESOL for about like 3 years before they get into regular classes. So
I see.
yeah, he was 5. But so Munia, I mean, her nickname is Munia, okay? So, but her actual name is Sifat. So she was my main motivator. But then there was something else. So along the way, I went to school, and I was not like the typical Indian child who gets like straight A's and whatnot. I got like horrible grades, and my parents just always thought, okay, I'm just talking too much, I'm wasting time, I'm playing or something, right? But for me, I always had this feeling that there was something else. I knew I was smart. I couldn't quite figure it out, but that motivation kept me going, and I actually loved school, even though I did horribly and whatnot, but I had a ton of friends. So then we get to college, and so I barely graduated from high school. Okay.
Riffat, I want to ask you if any of your teachers ever pointed out anything to the parents that, there's nothing wrong with Riffat, it's just that perhaps she needs a special kind of help or somebody who's more trained. No, it didn't happen. I see.
Nope, not. And I remember, that's the thing, in my long-term memory, it's like alhamdulillah, it's like an elephant, right? So, and I think about that a lot, even the standardized testing, I still have those old scores, and I look at it and I'm like, why did they see that there was a clear discrepancy between nonverbal and verbal? So I considered myself what I call a crack kid, okay, which are the kids who are not I was a nice person. I was very fun to be around. Yes, I talked, but I wasn't like a behavioral issue in the classroom. And I feel that for kids like that, we kind of scrape by. And so teachers don't really pay attention to us. And so we're actually the type of kid that will fall through the cracks if somebody doesn't catch us. And so
in those days, I suppose that was happening a lot because people didn't even recognize that, a child may have special needs.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Especially with so I actually have a learning disability, right? So and that's actually the largest amount of disabilities amongst the student population in schools. And with learning disability, you can't see it, right? You can't see that they have an issue with reading, or that they're just, they're dyslexic, or you can't see it. They look like a regular person. And so because it's an invisible disability challenge, people are less understanding, which is why we do need to talk about these facets of a person's personality.
I'm wondering, when you went to college, did you go with the understanding that, hey, I'm going to have the same issues I've had in school? Or were you now thinking, I'm older? I mean, did you actually figure it out by that time that, okay, I just need someone who understands how I want to learn, what is needed in my life to be able to learn?
So it's interesting you say that, because so remember, I barely graduated from high school. However, I applied to George Mason University, and I received what they call a conditional. I was accepted. No, first of all, I was accepted. Okay, but then I bombed my senior exams. So then I got another letter saying, you're accepted based on if you get a 3.0 GPA in your first semester. So that, as you know, they call that a conditional acceptance. So when my father saw that and read that letter, he was like, no. You are not going to a school where there are people walking around with higher GPAs than yours, and you think you're going to learn sort of thing. So basically, he sent me to community college. And I remember, and at that, as I said, the whole Indian model minority, right? Who goes to community college? But let me tell you, it's like my father understood what I needed, even though he couldn't express it eloquently, and it came out like very tough love. And so I went to community college, and in community college, I did, I took courses and stuff, but again, I had to repeat things, math, repeated it 2-3 times, science, again, I did well in liberal arts. And then I actually transferred to James Madison University because it's a Virginia State college. So it was an agreement like, okay, if you do 2 years of this, then you can go to any college sort of thing. I got into James Madison University, which is the same place that my brother went to. And so 2 years there, right? Or actually like 2.5, 3 years, right? And basically I majored in speech pathology. It was my last year of college, and I got a D in neuroanatomy, okay? And that meant I couldn't graduate. And I already was delayed, okay? So I had to graduate somehow. And I remember winter break, and I was home, and I was so upset because I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And so I talked with my professor, who'd also known me in her other classes, and she said, Riffat, I think you actually may have a learning disability because you present yourself so well in class. You're the first person in class, you raise your hand, you ask such good questions, and you present yourself so well, but when you take a test, you fail. And so I think you actually might have a learning disability. And if you do, then you can go back to university and fight for accommodations and get a chance to retake neuroanatomy. And so I was like,
what you're telling me is that you were already in about your mid-20s, that it was discovered for the first time that you need a special teacher or a teacher who understands your needs. I mean, before that, nobody in the school system, not until that time, like when you're actually graduating, that somebody had the sense to see that, okay, this girl, she just needs a little different kind of teaching techniques, perhaps. There's nothing wrong with her.
Right. Or even just what we call accommodation, such as extra time, And so basically I found the educational psychologist. I made myself an appointment. My mom drove me. And then, I took all the tests and everything. And when we came back, that was the day that my mom also got a phone call from a prospective asking if I was bright enough.
That's a typical South Asian angle to the story now.
Right. And my mom, as I said, we had just completed testing, and she just found out, exactly where my skills were in. And so she was like, right?
For our non-South Asian viewers, I would like to just mention that, what we are referring to is actually skin color and not the brightness of a human being. Of course, you are a bright person. And the problem with the whole South Asian color thing is that when they're looking for brides, one of the main things that is asked is if she's fair. So Riffat used the word bright, which I'm sure is also used in that context, and it is extremely horrible. So it's a funny twist to the.
I remember it so vividly, right? And the prospective himself was the opposite of bright, so it was very interesting how he wanted a partner.
I'm not surprised. Most of the times that is the case.
Right. So anyways, that was my game changer. And basically the educational psychologist said that, I've been compensating for all these years, but now, like, my brain needs other ways of learning how to learn, right? So it gave me the strategies to use and stuff, but it also suggested the the exercise and the nutrition, as well as the medication component, right? And so my father, okay, is a pharmacist. That's his life. That was that's what he did all his life. He was a pharmacist, and he used to call himself a bartender for drugs. So my father was against the medication, and I went back to school because I'm now in my mid-20s, right? I went back to school. I still had the script. I talked with my professors, my special education professors, told them what happened. And they said, you can try it, see how it works, but it there are no like long-term, side effects sort of thing, right? And so then I went to the nearest CVS and I got the prescription filled. And I will never forget what it felt like to actually be calm and motivated and self-directed and focused. It was such a game changer. And so that last semester, I actually attained a 3.5 GPA. And I didn't tell my parents because I knew if I told them right then and there, they would be like, no, 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 right? They had to, in my head, I knew they had to see the results. So I did graduate in summer, August, kind of thing. But I showed them my, I did get to take neuroanatomy, and I got a B, okay. And
so from D, you were able to get to B because somebody recognized that,
right. So what they so what colleges will typically do is when you show them your ladder, then they have what they call they'll make accommodations for you, okay, at the student services center, and they'll say, okay, she needs her notes recorded, okay, so I don't have to write notes in class, right? Or the main thing was I needed extra testing time. So that was honestly the main issue, because in college all you have are just tests, and it's not like writing a paper. And so I got that, and so I had to request that accommodation, and they gave it to me, and it was only then I was able to retake neuroanatomy. And so that was the very first time I had to fight for myself. Basically, that's when I knew what it was like to advocate for oneself. That's pretty much when I learned about affirmative action and whatnot. So
Riffat, I want to ask you if in those days there was a field like special education. Were there teachers being trained in those days for special education?
Yes, but it was for learning disabilities. If you had like a reading issue, it wasn't for things like ADHD or visual perception, which is my learning disability is actually visual perception and processing and ADHD. Okay, so basically it's like I can't see, then I have attention issues to see. So it was a very interesting case. And so nobody thought, okay, well, let's give her extra time. Let's reduce the amount of math problems on a worksheet instead of like 50 math problems all staring at me. And like, oh, then you get overwhelmed, right? Nobody thought about all that because, as I said, people didn't talk, especially in the Desi community. We don't talk about such things, right? Yeah. And I didn't mix a lot with other I had a lot of American friends, but at that age,
your family is an immigrant family, and especially the initial years, people don't know what's happening, and most of the community life is spent within the immigrant, wherever you are from, whether it's Bangladeshi or Indian and so on. So Riffat, before we move on, I want to ask you if doing all this had already put you in the mental sort of commitment that I am going to help others who have similar issues.
Yes. So as I said, I always loved communication. I always loved talking and everything. So my dream was initially to be a meteorologist, but it was a lot of science courses and I wasn't good in science, so I knew. anyways, and so after I found out about my, what I had, and I got the accommodations, that was the thing. I was already in the field of speech language pathology because I wanted to help people with other language disorders, like my cousin. And so and so that's what propelled me to what's it called, to try to get into grad school for speech language pathology, which actually did not happen because it's very competitive and they only look at your GPA. Although if I do it now, I could totally get it because it's all online now.
But did you at this time already start thinking in terms of okay, I want to be that teacher in the classroom who's going to,
Yes.
you had
I
already.
did not want any child to basically go through what I went through. Okay. And I tell this to my own child now, my daughter, because she's also on the spectrum, and I do notice the way she is completing her work. Sometimes she doesn't use the most efficient way, right? And I'll tell her, I'm teaching you a way that it's efficient. You don't have to spend so much time on it, right? And she does understand, but at the same time, I also had to take a step back and let her figure out her own way of learning. And sometimes you do have to take, for her, sometimes you do have to take the long way to get to the right answer, which is okay. Okay. But my mantra to this day is I don't want any child to go through my struggle. And so if I can, alleviate that anxiety, if I can help somebody, learn how to read, even if it takes them like 2 or 3 years, same thing. And now it goes, and I also, my focus has changed now to adults with disabilities too. So yes, it's just interesting how it just kind of all rolled into one.
Yeah, it is interesting. And we always in Peace Vigil talk about how our personal struggles and personal battles lead us to do something that will benefit others who may be going through the same issues. It starts from the personal, right? I mean, it's only then that you realize that, okay, somebody's pain, you're realizing that it's the same or similar, and that whatever I do may help others as well.
Exactly, and that's the whole thing. And so I wanted to also say that I did do a stint of teaching in Fairfax County Public Schools, which I'm sure is one of the top counties for public school education in the country, and it's been consistently so in the last 20 years basically. Anyways, the children that I taught were students on the spectrum, okay? And they were severe, but their parents were affluent. They had resources. And it was very stressful. I didn't like it. It didn't do well, okay? So I didn't stay with the county. And so then I made that decision, you know what? I realized those kids, they'll be okay because they've got the resources. Their parents will fight for them, will advocate for them. They'll be okay. That's when I flipped to DC public schools, because those children, I realized, were not going to be okay. They're the ones who actually needed the most help.
Even when we look at India, children who are on the spectrum, the autism spectrum, they receive no help in the government school system. Even in private schools, there are very few teachers who know what to do, but at least you have that opportunity if you have money. You can still find a special education teacher, or you can send your child to a school where there are facilities.
And it's only now in Pakistan that there are people who are advertising their speech and language services for children on the spectrum, which is huge, to be like, hi, I'm specialized in this, I can teach your child, blah, blah, blah. So, and that's in Pakistan. It's very interesting to see what's going on in that country regarding, teaching students with special needs, because they also have universities where you can get that degree now, which is a big deal.
It's interesting in this conversation that we see these different layers. If you're affluent, you have a better chance of surviving in the world than, if you're not affluent.
Right. And so those years in DC, 7 years of teaching, were like the most intense, toughest, but I loved every minute of it. I loved working with those children. I loved the parents. I loved my principal. and I didn't have many supplies. I didn't have much equipment. I mean, my desks had like, I don't know, bullet holes through it, you know, but I knew that me being there in that classroom and accepting each student for who they were and listening to the parents was itself a big deal too, you know. I also, um, my children also didn't have a lot of clothing. They came to school with no food, and they got breakfast at school, but you know, school breakfasts are light. So I spent my majority of my salary on, you know, buying them clothes from the thrift store because that's all I could afford, and you know, going to Walmart and buying them extra snacks and things. And so, I mean, I was single. I could do all these things. They were my students, and I loved them. But I also mixed with the general ed teachers a lot. And that's how I just got into this whole, that's how I lived the philosophy of inclusion, okay? Which at that time was, like in Fairfax County schools, was a big deal. And you, you know, like, oh my gosh, ESC students in the general education classroom. Like, oh, even though it's just so easy when you actually try to live it. And the teachers.
So what you're saying is that in a regular classroom, you can have kids whose needs are special in terms of learning, and kids who don't need those tools. That those kids can coexist in a classroom. Is that what you're saying?
So it was just that at that time, it was still this new concept, like, you know, because that was 20 something years ago, right? It was just still this. Ooh, because gen ed teachers have their own little domain. We're here, and the fact that they wanted to mix, like, oh gosh, like that's how the term mainstreaming came in, right? Yeah. We don't use that word anymore. Mainstreaming is a very antiquated term. It's not used anymore, and within the field, and it's the word, you know, means inclusion, and so that's how I got into practicing inclusion, was just basically having my students participate in the activities of the general ed class, and then I ended up also teaching some parts of the day, and then my other the other gen ed teacher would teach, you know, the other parts of the day. Like we even split classes and whatnot. I mean, it was that freedom to teach the way you want to teach. Yeah. That was given to me, and because of that freedom, I loved it. I cannot say that you just can do the same thing now.
Yeah. So tell us, yeah, no, Riffat, I want to, really talk about that inclusiveness in a classroom and how it can be achieved with so many years of experience in teaching that you have. Please tell us how one can do it, you know, because what happens is, in most spaces, people with learning disabilities are considered an obstacle. You know, they're like, oh, you know, this person is slowing down the class, or oh, you know, and it's very demeaning for that person, because, you know, obviously he or she is not stupid, but the teachers are not trained, and there's not enough time. The student teacher ratio is also, you know, not what we should have. So given all these things, what are some things that people can do in a classroom to make people feel included?
Smile to the person. That one behavior just opens up that relationship, and you would be surprised at how educators either forget to greet the student or don't really pay attention to that one act. So I guess I look at that because, remember, my background is speech language pathology, right? So smiling is a form of communication. And
what a beautiful thing you have told us today, Riffat. Then I hope that people remember this one lesson, at least, that they can take from this interview, is what a simple thing and such a human thing to do. And I know there's some teachers who, I mean, forget about special ed or anything. I mean, they just don't give that respect to the learner, you know, just to sort of acknowledge that child exists in a classroom.
Exactly. So I do a lot of work from Sen, right? So and so because of my son, I have these little buddies that I talk to and I communicate with on a, regular basis. So one of my buddies, she's 33 years old, and she has cerebral palsy and she has epilepsy, and we talk on the phone, and she'll text me, "Can you talk? What time?" And then we'll talk on the phone. And one of the things I've asked her is, what was school like? What was high school like? And she remembers, and she told me about some incidents where she was tired, right? Because she has epilepsy, so she had to take the drugs, made her sleepy, blah blah blah. And she was tired, and the teacher slapped the books on her desk to alert her to like wake up.
Oh no. Oh.
And so as a teacher, it was either the teacher, it was I'm sure she said it was the assistant or the teacher, but assistants and teachers, honestly, if you're going to work in this field of special education, it's all the same, but you have to have that understanding that children, these students with special needs, they have other issues aside from learning. There are the physical issues, they can be sleepy, and so you need to accept it. It's okay if they're dozing, you don't need to slap a book. And that was when she was in high school, and she still remembers that.
And people do remember those experiences, right, from their classrooms. In a classroom, when people are not included, and you were in the DC school system, you've been in other schools, what are some of the long-term impacts you see in students? So like you have mentioned this one incident where this buddy of yours remembers what happened to her. But in terms of actual learning, does it keep making things worse? So it's like a domino effect, that, can carry on into life. And how have you seen things change when help is given even at a later stage in life? So in your case, for instance, you only got help when you're in your mid-20s. But can things be reversed for people? Can they get their confidence back?
Yes. I am a clear indicator because I did go to grad school. I got straight A's, 3.9 GPA, kind of thing. So I am one example that change can be made. But I do have examples of, students with Down syndrome, who graduated from high school with a regular degree and are going on to a college that is what's it called, that accommodates their learning needs. I found out through the masjid that I primarily do a lot of work for, Masjid Al Salam, and I talked with the parent about, oh my gosh, and I asked her, like, how did you do it? Because there's so many of these children with disabilities are just kind of like sitting at home, not doing much, because there's not much out there for that age group, the 18 and up. And she said, that's all up, but she really advocated for her son. She knew what her son needed, and her son, I will tell you, is not like, because that's what people also say. Oh, but he's like mild, so that's why he was able to do all these things. No. Her son also, he is able to communicate, but there is he does have issues with communicating clearly, kind of thing. He will like shrug, he uses a physical, movements, kind of thing. But and that's my point, is that he did it. And it was because he had parents who knew how to advocate for their child, who knew how to access the resources, and, and fought for their child. And he obviously had teachers who showed him, because parents can't do everything. He had teachers, because he went to Eastlake High School, which is down the road from me, down in Florida. He had teachers who knew how to structure his academic track to steer him in the right direction and get him to that place. They had a goal, he's going to go to college. And so that was it was really heartwarming to see. I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, so, like, I need to give you a gift next time I'm going to see a gift, and so and that's the thing, and I've seen the positives and I've seen the negatives. Then there's the child who truant from school, absent from school. Mom also had issues, domestic violence, poverty, and
So,
just
I guess the thing really is that perhaps it's not just what you get in a classroom, but what the society as a whole is offering you. So, as we know, disability can be made more complex, when we throw in the class and the race and, the region and so on. So classroom is not enough, right? DC school system is a great place to learn about that intersectionality, things in different layers and coming together and interconnected. Yeah.
right. And you see where the power and justice are. You see where the oppression is because of those colliding factors. That's the whole gist of it. That's the importance of intersectionality, because when you put everybody's identities together and then you wonder why, it's so clear when you look at the systemic aspect. So in terms of the people, it's social isolation. That ends up what's happening. The isolation aspect, the exclusionary aspect, and so for example, my peer buddy that I talked to on the phone, I asked, she's so empathetic. She's very helpful. She offers ideas on, what I should do with Zafira too. It's very interesting. So I asked her about, her job. Why didn't she go into this job track, vocational? And she said it was because she had epilepsy. And due to her epilepsy, there's the risk of seizures, right? And so she cannot be employed because of that employer's liability issue. And so that itself is another barrier to including people with disabilities in the workplace. And so as I said, I've talked with her on the phone many times. I've talked with her like at the most like 30, 45 minutes. She's never had a seizure on the phone with me. And so my thing is like, if I was that employer, I would hire her. If she had a seizure, I would accept that she had a seizure, because her seizures are also, she's had complex, she's had partials, okay, where you walk around just kind of like dizzy and then it goes away. But then there's also the ones where you're on the floor writhing around kind of thing. But eventually they stop. And I guess that's my whole thing is like, as I said, if I was an employer, I would hire her knowing, okay, she has this risk, but I would just accept that allowance.
Yeah. What's also
systemic labor system we have in this country. I mean,
yeah, what also I think is very glaring in all this is that the way the healthcare system works is also so unjust that people are scared of things that can actually be helped. There are medicines and things that can help you through those things. But the employers also know that, oh, okay, if something happens, I'll be in trouble. The employee also doesn't have the right benefits needed. So I think all this, becomes so complex.
So the schools have become more inclusive. There are more special needs students in gen ed classrooms. Okay, teachers do need to get more education, general ed education. The gen ed teachers need more education with how to teach students with special needs. But there are the classroom, when you look at them, you can see that, okay, they allow students to stand up and do their work, or put their paper against a wall and do their assignment. Even the chairs, the chairs have changed. Some kids need like those bounce balls, those big yoga balls to sit and do their work, because that bouncing action actually causes what we call proprioception, which increases attention to the brain, right? Just that bouncing, and then you're focused. Like I actually have completed papers on these yoga balls. So it's those, and you'll see that in the classroom. So the schools are getting definitely way more inclusive. You can see it also in the literature, in the books that teachers will ask students to read. For example, in Zafir's third grade class, her teacher picked the book Wonder, okay, as a class read. So every after lunch the teacher reads the book. So it was, and Wonder is an amazing book about a student with a craniofacial syndrome. He wears a helmet, Okay, so it's about what his life in a public school and what happens. And so it's amazing, the literature, the amount of stories that have come out about living with a disability is really neat. And so you'll see that in the schools. And what's it called, like even like this book here, the Worry Less book, The Strong Find Calm and Tame Your Anxiety. If you look at it, it's like in comic form, which makes it very easy to read and laugh about, like if you yourself anxiety. So this would be good for like a middle schooler. So the school, you'll see that it is becoming more inclusive. The problem I see is the spaces, is the workspace, especially employment. Okay, after they are done with school, sometimes they are headed to the vocational rehab centers to learn how to work a job kind of thing, and then they can get employed. But a lot of times they're not, right? And because employers look at the disability from a medical perspective and not from a social perspective. And that's the main problem, is that disability is still looked at through a medical model, not the social justice inclusion. So I just want to, the main statistic people should know about is the 1 in 5. Basically, 1 in 5 people have a disability in America. And around the world, it's about 15%, okay, that have a disability. I actually feel the WHO did this study. I feel that there's more, they're just undiagnosed kind of thing. But specifically in America, 1 in 5. Okay, that's 20% of your population. So you need to think about that 20% of your population with a disability in every single facet. For example, so the workplace is a huge issue. A lot of these people are not employed because of they look at the medical model, but it's also in the way that employers attract people with disabilities to apply to their institution. And there are organized nonprofits that are working on having people with disabilities apply and have a seat at the table. And that's the other part. It's like there's layers of inclusion, right? And with there's the awareness, which we've been working so hard on all these years. There's the accommodations, okay, which is like your ramps and your electric door openers. And then finally there's this acceptance component, and not just like, oh, I invited you to this party or to this conference. No, at the table making decisions, that's the change. And we have made that change, but we can do better, is what I'm saying. And so when it comes to what's it called, applying for that particular job, organizations need to look at how their websites are constructed. Okay, a lot of websites are not what we call disability friendly, right? Imagine if you're vision impaired and you're trying to apply for this job. Well, there are ways you can do it, okay, but the actual web page needs to be constructed to allow that. Okay, and same thing for hard of hearing impaired. So you have to make your websites, because that's how people apply for jobs nowadays, right? Is online. Okay, and so that is one area that people are now trying to focus on, making their websites more interactive friendly. Okay, so the other thing is, so let's just say now the person with a disability is actually employed in the company, okay, in an organization, a nonprofit, Goodwill or something, right? Or any organization. So how they have groups, like if you're a minority, if you're Black, they have support groups for people, for minorities, right? They don't have it necessarily for disabilities. So if they had a disability support group where co-workers with a disability can call each other up and say, hey, how are you doing? How's it going? Oh my gosh, I have this project, but I'm so overwhelmed. You have that support group. That another person understands what you're going through. So if organizations can develop, put in a support group like that, that would be great. As well as even hiring you always have consultants, right? consultants who leadership and whatnot. So that helps, having that support group, but even hiring what we call an inclusion consultant, like who can look at this space and say, oh, this is how you can make your space accessible, whether it's the seating of the desks. Do you need to lower it? Do you need to, can you make it higher? The chairs, the bathrooms. These people can look and modify an environment to fit every type of person.
True. True. That's very important.
So we covered schools, we covered the workplace, right? So those are some areas or how you can develop inclusive spaces.
Yeah.
I primarily focus now on the home. I mean, my focus is on the spiritual component space, the spiritual space, how that can be more inclusive.
So we know that you work with the masjids, the local mosques, and I remember that you were telling me about this amazing project that you all did, which was to build a parking lot that was wheelchair accessible.
Yes. So basically, that masjid, their parking lot is gravel. Okay. And so it's not easy to always walk on. I've seen, little kids slip, kind of thing. Bringing a stroller in, I mean, you can imagine, kind of difficult. But it also prevents people in wheelchairs from wanting to come to the masjid, wanting to come to the mosque, and no matter what path you follow, everybody needs some sort of purification, cleansing of spirit, right? And you get it in a space. And so
and also that feeling of community, right? Because what we talked about is that it is not just the accessibility in the school and the workplace, but also the larger society, and your religious community is part of that social interaction that happens. And I think to begin with places where people come for prayers and so on, it's very important, and you are paying attention to that. Others can do the same in other places, maybe the neighborhood parks, complex, residential complex. So certainly that social aspect has to be covered.
The acceptance. I mean, it's the awareness, right? And so awareness comes in form of like culture, like, designing an inclusive culture. It's not a light switch that you turn on and off. Okay. An inclusive culture is built on, it's developed, it's worked on. So it's like a dimmer switch,
So it's public education. You need to start from the beginning, and that acceptance has to be there. So tell me one thing, Riffat. You mentioned that you have 2 kids and one of them is on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. What I want to know is that as a parent, when people say something or do something which comes out of their ignorance, I should say, because, I mean, obviously people are not mean always. They're ignorant about autism. What do you do as a parent? How do you deal with that situation?
So in the beginning, so understand that, Zafira was very different when she was younger than she is now. Okay. And so in the beginning, it was apparent when she wasn't talking that she was a little different than other children, right? And then I had already gotten the diagnosis and everything. And I remember one of my friends, Desi friends, saying, Riffat, don't tell people, I wouldn't talk about it. And I felt very kind of like silenced. Like, why should I not talk about it because of marriage prospects? When she's like, eons old from now or what? Like, I didn't understand. And so I did withdraw from the social community at that time for a little bit, and kind of just, took my children out, to various other places, that didn't require a lot of interaction for me as a parent. Okay. And that lasted about a year because I love people, and you have to engage with society, right? And so then birthday parties were always really difficult, and I was like, you know what? If Zafira rips off the tablecloth at a birthday party, if I have to holler out on my shoulder, crying, whatever, if I have to leave a party after only getting there 30 minutes because she's having a meltdown, the anxiety is wrong, it's okay. I had to tell myself that it's okay. Like, it was okay for people to see the real me and the real child and the real life of living with a special needs child and having a special need myself, kind of thing. And so that's how that's how people got to know me and got to understand what it was like living with a child with autism. And people started would come up to me and tell me their stories, and I would then offer, this is what you can do, this is where I went, da da da. So
So that's also part of the work that you're very interested in and that you do, as I said in the introduction, is parent advocacy,
mm-hmm.
which also I am guessing also includes awareness about these issues, because it's not just fighting for the rights of your child, but also making sure that everyone around you understands that, you
Right.
see, these children are also part of our world, and that we need to make efforts that will
Yes.
include them.
Exactly.
And yeah, and one problem with fear, as we know, is that most of it comes from ignorance. So when we don't know something, we fear it. And there are
Mhm.
so many of these perceptions about autistic kids, they're going to come and, like, be violent, or all
Mhm.
sort of things, not realizing that there's a whole spectrum, and that there are special ways by which
Mhm.
children
Yeah.
can be included. There are also tools and
Cool.
behavioral mechanisms by
Mhm.
which we can include
Exactly.
people.
Exactly. And again, it's and so when I say the smile, right? So I've had parents tell me, I've asked them, like, do you come to the masjid? Like, what is your spirit? I'll ask, what is your spiritual level? How are you feeling? And they'll tell me, I used to come to the masjid, I used to come to the mosque, but then parents would give me, people would give me looks. Okay, so then I stopped because I didn't like the looks. Okay, and that's one thing we can do. We can stop the look, like, just smile, you know just accept. And so it's teaching people in that space that these children are normal. It also goes to the religious leader themselves when they do their lectures. Okay, um as many lectures are based on, like, charity and purity and uh you know living a good living a life of service, right? But you also, life of service means also accepting everybody in space, all colors, all shapes, all races, because the mosque can also be very divided. There's, like, mosques that are only have, like, black people, and there's the South Asian mosque. I mean, but it doesn't need to be that way. Build a mosque where everybody can come, make it accommodating. um
And
yeah.
that awareness, once it comes, you will be hopefully more patient, more
Exactly.
understanding. How did
Exactly.
you manage that in your local mosque? How did you?
I'm still managing it. So one of my tasks. Okay, so as the whole premise behind Mohsen is to make the masjid accessible to people with disabilities. So what does that mean? Is it just the ramp? And so they have tiers, okay, in certification. But basically, it's not just the ramps. It's also goes to the religious leader and telling and asking them to do a lecture on what Islam says about disability. And so many religious leaders, they're hesitant. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to say the word disability. And so one of the requirements at Mohsen for a masjid to be what we call Mohsen certified is to have the religious leader do a khutbah, do a talk 4 times a year. Okay. And so my job is to make sure that actually happens, and collaborate with the imam, say, okay, when do you plan on doing this khutbah, and here's some ideas on what you can talk about. And I'll actually do the research and bring up people in the past during the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, and kind of thing. And some are, as I said, are resistant. Okay, but some understand, are like, oh yes, they get it, they understand completely. And I'm lucky that one of Masjid al-Salam is very inclusive oriented and accommodating, kind of thing. And so, because when you hear about it, when a leader's talking about people with disability, it's like it's acceptance. You're telling everyone, accept these people, So it's more natural.
But one question I have about inclusivity, whether in a mosque or a temple or, in a school and so on, is that do you find that people who have family members who have a disability or who themselves have disabilities are able to join, to sort of organize and change things? Or do you think many of them don't join because they think there's still a stigma, and that, they will, because you see people are hiding those disabilities, and if they're going to come out, is it going to be a problem? So how do you deal with that? Are people easily organizing, or does it take a push?
It's like, so if I wasn't part of a group, okay, it's it would be difficult. I could try and say, hey, let's begin a weekend school for students with challenges, where they, and it's Sunday school, right? So let's learn, especially in Sunday school. I could try. And but again, it would take just again a lot of talking, a lot of convincing, a lot of what I call policy work. And a lot of what I say, like if I having an awareness event, even if one person shows up, having another awareness event, and next time 2 people show up, okay, great. And so, but because I am part of a group that already has an established framework of how to do things in a faith-based establishment, it makes it a lot easier.
I think organizing, like in any other field as well, is a tricky business. But once you have enough people join in, even if it's a small group, but it's a group, and they're consistently doing work.
Exactly.
People do look up to you, and people come and try and learn and understand, because it's not just the question of rights of people who have disability, but it's a question of a society that is more humane, because the same rules will apply to other things as well, not just to disability, but to race, to class.
Right. So I wanted to also just back up a little bit and tell you, so I do have these two of my best friends, and the 3 of us, we call ours like triple threat, because we all of us have children with disabilities, okay? And so before Mohsen came along, one of my friend Lena, she has a daughter with cerebral palsy. She was the one who wanted that parking lot to be paved, okay? And she tried hard to tell the board, but what happens when you bring up something you want? What do people say? We don't have the money. It always comes down to money, money, money. And so she did. She tried advocating for her daughter to be able to come to the mosque, and she tried pushing for the paved parking lot. It was only with raising the money and Mohsen, then the board understood, okay, we need this. So yes, you can do it on your own. It's just very difficult, but you as long as you just need the support, and
we
just
always
passion to just do it. I mean, some days are really difficult, and you're just like, oh my God, and you want to stay in your bubble and think somebody else will do it, but no, it can be you.
Riffat, my last question to you is, at the end of the day, we are all juggling so many things. How have you been able to convince your family and friends that, look, while I am a mom and while I am a wife, for me, this is also extremely important?
Right. So, there's that love languages, right? So Basil, he knows that my love language is service. And so when that love bank is not filled or depleting, then I'm not exactly the most nicest person to be around, sort of thing, because I need something, and I need to do this service. It's good for myself. It's good for society, and so my partner, he understands that, right? So if you have people who understand that you have a love for service, they will be more accepting, and luckily I do. And my children, they think, They think I have the best job in the world. Zafira said, Mommy, you've got the best job in the world. You put on events, you're on Zoom, you hand out food.
It's helping others. And in helping others, you are getting completeness. You are happy, you are a bit, it's a full circle. You're right.
Because the thing is, we're all broken in some way, form. We're all broken, so we have to help each other, glue each other together. Okay, and that's what another imam did a lecture on that, and he said his last line is that we are all broken, and we need each other to fix ourselves, to do things for this world. Because when we're broken, we can't do anything. We're not exactly very what's it called? What's the term? We're not contributing to society if we're depressed.
Yeah. And also, when you're experiencing something painful, you're channeling that pain into something that becomes positive. So you change other people's lives, and in the process, you also heal. So, that brokenness, it's not just about others, but about ourselves. And I think in some ways we are trying to make ourselves whole by becoming part of the larger pain. And in doing so, we are also recognizing that there are different kinds of pains and different kinds of struggles that are going on. So Riffat, thank you so much for taking time out. Fact is that there are people in our world who have disabilities, like Riffat said, 20% of American population has disabilities of one kind or another. That's a huge number of people. And that is not counting the people who have not been diagnosed. So we don't know. And especially in the South Asian society, I find that, so much of it is hidden. Like people just tell you to get on with your life, or, hide things, which in itself creates a lot of long-term issues. So I think the one thing that I've learned from this interview, a lot of things I've learned through this interview, but a few things I'll point out is, number one, like Riffat said, there are disabilities that you can see, and then there are disabilities that you can't see. And what you don't know, if you don't have information and knowledge, you're going to fear it, and you're going to discriminate. So you do need to increase your knowledge. Which hopefully this interview will do for you, but also there's so many resources out there. The third is to just have a compassionate heart and an accepting heart and mind. And the last thing I would say from this interview that I've gathered is, like anything else, if you want change, if something disturbs you, join hands, join forces with others. Because organizing, and having more people do something is going to be always more effective than you trying to just individually change things.
Right. It's like that African proverb: when you run by yourself, you run fast, but when you run together, you run longer. I may have gotten that wrong, but there's I've heard of that.
The spirit of Ubuntu, as we call it here in Africa, is that we rise together. If we do things together, we pull each other up to a level where we are all happy, rather than just us individually succeeding. Because obviously, if you have resources, you can get the best care for your child, and you can, as you were saying, we can all live in our bubbles, but that's not going to improve things for the society that we live in. So Riffat, thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you and answering your questions, and I love the work that Peace Vigil does, and I look forward to many more projects and everything with you.
I thank you, Riffat. I will say bye-bye for now, but of course we'll continue to interact and continue to make a difference in this world wherever we are. Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The D Word, a show about differences. Please do remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. On behalf of Peace Vigil, this is Samir. Thank you for listening.